What if I told you that Chinese households have been quietly stockpiling foods that last not just weeks, but months, even years, without a single modern preservative? These aren't survival foods from a bunker. These are real ingredients sitting right now in kitchens across China, ready for winter, ready for hard times, ready for whatever comes next. Today we are counting down 20 of the most powerful long-lasting winter foods that Chinese families have relied on for centuries. And we are starting with number 20 and working our way to the most essential one of all. Number 20. Dried tangerine peel, known in Chinese as chen pai. This one surprises people. You eat an orange or a tangerine, and in most households around the world, the peel goes straight into the trash. But in Chinese homes, particularly in Guangdong province, those peels are washed, scraped, and then laid out to dry in the sun for days until they curl and harden into something almost unrecognizable. The magic of chen pai is that the older it gets, the more valuable it becomes. Some families pass down aged chen pai that is literally decades old, stored in clay jars in cool, dry corners of the home. The preservation method is deceptively simple. Peel is dried completely until all moisture is gone, then stored in an airtight container away from direct sunlight. No refrigeration, no chemicals, just time and air. Chen pai is used in winter soups, teas, and traditional remedies for digestion and cough. The older the peel, the deeper the flavor and the stronger the medicinal value. And speaking of things that get better with age underground, number 19 is going to change how you think about eggs. Number 19. Preserved eggs, known as pai dan or century eggs. Pai dan are one of the most misunderstood foods in Chinese culture. They look alarming to outsiders, with their dark, translucent gel-like whites and green-gray yolks. But inside Chinese households, particularly in Hunan and Zhejiang, these eggs are a winter staple that requires zero refrigeration once properly made. The traditional method involves coating raw duck or chicken eggs in a mixture of clay, ash, salt, quicklime, and rice husks. This alkaline coating essentially cures the egg from the outside in, over a period of several weeks to a few months. The high pH environment changes the protein structure of the egg entirely, eliminating harmful bacteria and creating a shelf-stable product. Families would wrap each egg individually, store them in clay pots or wooden barrels, and keep them in cool, shaded areas of the home. Modern versions sometimes use a salt brine method instead, but the traditional ash coating approach is still practiced in rural households across southern China. Next up is something so simple it almost sounds too easy, yet it has fed Chinese families through famines and frozen winters for generations. Number 18. Dried shiitake mushrooms, known as gan xiang gu. In late autumn, before the cold fully sets in, families in Fujian, Zhejiang, and other forested provinces harvest shiitake mushrooms in bulk. Fresh mushrooms are cleaned, never washed with water because moisture is the enemy, and then threaded onto strings or laid on bamboo racks called shai in the sun. The drying process takes anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on the thickness of the cap and the intensity of the sunlight. The key is getting the mushroom completely bone dry so that when you squeeze it, it snaps rather than bends. Once dried, they go into cloth bags or sealed ceramic containers and will last easily 2 years or longer in a cool pantry. The drying process actually concentrates the glutamate content, making dried shiitake far more flavorful than fresh ones. In winter, families rehydrate them in warm water, saving the soaking liquid which is used as a broth base. What comes next is something far older than any of these mushrooms, something that predates written Chinese history itself. Number 17. Fermented black soybeans, known as douqi. Douqi is one of the oldest fermented foods in Chinese culinary history, with records dating back over 2,000 years. Making douqi at home is a multi-stage process. Soybeans are first soaked overnight, then steamed or boiled until soft. After cooling, the beans are mixed with salt and sometimes ginger or chili, then packed tightly into clay urns. The urns are sealed with cloth or a loose-fitting lid and left in a warm spot to ferment naturally over several weeks. The ambient mold and bacterial cultures in the environment do the work. After fermentation, the beans are either left wet as shi or spread out to dry in the sun as dry douqi, which extends shelf life dramatically. Dried ochi stored in sealed containers can last well over a year without refrigeration. Families in Hunan and Sichuan use it through winter as a seasoning paste, a condiment, and a flavor base for braised meats and stir-fries. Now we go from something fermented in an urn to something that has been hanging from rafters in Chinese homes for centuries. Number 16. Lapyuk, Chinese cured pork belly. When winter arrives in Guangdong and Sichuan, the sight of long strips of marinated pork belly hanging from balconies, wooden beams, and window frames is as familiar as Christmas lights elsewhere. Lapyuk, which literally translates to wax meat because of its firm, waxy texture after curing, is made by rubbing fresh pork belly with a mixture of salt, soy sauce, sugar, Shaoxing rice wine called Shaoxing Ju, and spices like star anise and Sichuan pepper. The meat is marinated for several days, turning regularly so every surface absorbs the cure evenly. After that, it is hung in a spot with good airflow, ideally outdoors in the cold, dry winter air, and left to wine dry for 2 to 4 weeks. The combination of salt curing and cold air drying removes enough moisture to prevent bacterial growth while concentrating fat and flavor. Properly dried lapyuk can last through the entire winter and into early spring without spoiling. The next item is so ancient that Chinese poets wrote about it during the Tang Dynasty, and families still make it the same way today. Number 15. Shiitake, Sichuan pickled mustard stems. Shiitake is made from the knobby, swollen stem of a specific variety of mustard plant called Jingyongjie Tai, and it is one of the most intensely flavored preserved vegetables in Chinese cuisine. The fresh stems are first air-dried outside to remove surface moisture, then rubbed generously with chili powder and salt. They are then pressed into ceramic crocks called pao kai tan under heavy stones to force out additional liquid. This pressing and salting phase lasts several days. After that, fresh spices and more chili are added, and the stems are packed tightly into sealed jars to continue fermenting for weeks to months. The longer the fermentation, the more sour, complex, and deeply savory the shiitake becomes. Sealed in its original brine inside a properly made ceramic jar, shiitake keeps for a year or more without refrigeration. Chinese households use it chopped into congee, noodles, and braised dishes throughout winter. What we look at next hangs in the same cold air as the cured pork, but has been protecting Chinese households from hunger for a completely different reason. Number 14. La Chang, Chinese sausage. La Chang are the thin, deeply red, sweet-savory dried sausages that appear in Chinese markets and home kitchens starting in late autumn. Making them at home involves mixing ground pork with a precise ratio of fat to lean meat, usually 7 parts lean to 3 parts fat, then combining it with salt, sugar, soy sauce, Shaoxing wine, and sometimes rose wine called Meigui Lu Ju for fragrance. The mixture is stuffed tightly into natural hog casings, twisted into links, and then hung outdoors to cure in the cool winter wind. Like lapyuk, the cold, dry air is essential. The low temperature prevents spoilage during the initial drying period, while the salt and sugar complete the curing process. After 2 to 3 weeks of wind drying, lechang becomes firm and almost jewel-like in color. Properly dried lechang, stored in a cool, dry place, will keep for months, and some families even freeze them in winter outdoor storage areas to stretch the supply into summer. The next food on our list looks nothing like a preservation food, but it has been quietly surviving in Chinese pantries for thousands of years. Number 13. Dried tofu, known as tofu gan. Fresh tofu spoils within days, but Chinese ingenuity transformed it into something that can last months. The process begins with firm tofu that has been pressed under heavy weights for an extended period to remove as much whey as possible. This extra pressed tofu is then either smoked over tea leaves and rice, achieving the smoked version called cha shi du gan, or marinated in spiced brine and then dried slowly in a ventilated space. The drying is done in stages, allowing the exterior to firm up gradually without cracking. In rural Anhui and Hunan, families hang blocks of pressed dried tofu from strings in cool, airy rooms for days or even weeks. The final product is dense, dark brown or amber in color, and intensely savory. It can be sliced thin and eaten cold, shredded into stir-fries, or simmered in braised dishes. stored in cloth bags or ceramic containers in a cool pantry. It remains edible for months, from something made of soybeans to something made from a grain that has sustained Chinese civilization since before the dynasties. Number 12. Mian fen, dried noodles, and rice. This might seem obvious, but the Chinese approach to storing grain-based staples goes far beyond simply pouring rice into a bag. Traditionally, families stored polished white rice in large ceramic urns called mi gang, layering dried chili peppers throughout to repel insects and placing camphor wood planks at the bottom to absorb excess moisture. Dried noodles were bundled in paper and stored hanging or lying flat in cool, ventilated rooms away from any light. Some families in northern China would dry toast raw rice slightly before storing it, reducing moisture content and extending shelf life. Properly stored white rice in a sealed ceramic urn with natural pest deterrents can remain edible and nutritionally intact for 2 to 3 years. In times of scarcity, this staple was the backbone of winter survival for millions of Chinese families across every province. What comes next is a fermented liquid that Chinese households have been aging in clay jars for longer than any living person can remember. Number 11. Lao Chou, aged soy sauce. Chinese soy sauce, particularly the dark-aged variety, is produced through a fermentation process that can stretch from several months to several years. At the household level, traditional soy sauce making begins by steaming soybeans and roasting wheat, then combining them with a mold culture called Q produce a fermented solid. This solid is mixed with salt brine and poured into large clay or ceramic jars left outdoors to ferment in both sun and rain. Families would stir the mash daily through summer months to encourage fermentation, and the liquid that accumulates is drawn off, filtered, and either used fresh or returned to the jar for additional aging. Aged dark soy sauce stored in sealed ceramic vessels literally does not expire. Some traditional producers and households have soy sauce aging in vessels for over 10 years, developing increasingly complex umami depth. Number 10 is something that lives in the cold ground itself, hiding from winter like a small miracle. Number 10. Turnips and daikon preserved as luobogan. Chinese families in Shandong, Hunan, and Guangdong take fresh daikon radish, called luobu in autumn, and transform it into dried radish strips, called luobogan, that last all winter and beyond. The radish is first peeled and cut into long, thick strips, or left in large wedges, then salted heavily and pressed under stones to extract moisture for 1 to 2 days. The salted strips are then rinsed and laid out on bamboo racks in the sun to dry for 5 to 10 days, being brought inside at night to avoid dew. Once fully dried, they can be rubbed with chili and spices before being packed into sealed jars for further fermentation into xian luo bu xian luo bo, the pickled version. Fully dried luo bo gan without additional pickling lasts up to a year in sealed containers, and the salted fermented version in brine inside a sealed crock keeps equally long. Number 9 is something floating at the surface of Chinese food culture, but anchored deep in preservation history. Number 9, dried seafood, hai wei gan. Coastal Chinese provinces like Fujian, Guangdong, and Zhejiang have practiced seafood drying for thousands of years. Shrimp become xia mi, small dried shrimp. Scallops become ganbei. Fish are salted and wind-dried to become jian yu. The drying process involves first heavy salting, which draws out moisture and begins preservation, followed by days of open-air sun and wind drying on bamboo racks. Fish are cleaned, split, rubbed inside and out with coarse sea salt, pressed under weights for a day or two, then hung or laid flat in coastal breezes for 1 to 3 weeks. Properly dried and salted seafood stored in sealed containers in a cool, dark pantry can last easily 6 months to a year. Dried shrimp and scallops in particular are prized for their concentrated ocean flavor and are used sparingly through winter as seasoning agents in soups and vegetable dishes. Number 8 is a food that most people associate with fresh summer kitchens, not winter survival. Number 8. Dried vegetables known as kai gan. Before the last autumn vegetables disappear, Chinese households go through a serious drying ritual. Long beans called jiangdu, eggplant, bitter melon, and mustard greens are all harvested in bulk, blanched briefly, then spread on large bamboo mats under direct sunlight. Blanching stops enzymatic activity that would cause discoloration and flavor loss, while sun-drying removes the moisture that causes rot. Some families in Hunan skip blanching entirely for certain vegetables, preferring a slower, deeper ferment dry that gives the seigan a more complex earthiness. Fully dried vegetables stored in cloth sacks hung in cool, dark rooms last through the entire winter into spring. In the coldest months, families rehydrate them in warm water and braise them with pork or preserved meats, creating rich, sustaining winter dishes. Number 7 sits between food and medicine in every Chinese grandmother's pantry. Number 7. Goji berries and dried jujubes, guqi and hongzao. Both guqi and hongzao are harvested in late summer and early autumn, then sun-dried over a period of several weeks until their moisture content drops low enough to prevent mold. Families in Ningxia for goji berries and hebei or Shandong for jujubes would spread them on rooftops or courtyard mats, turning them daily. Once fully dried, they are stored in cloth bags inside sealed ceramic crocks, sometimes with a small packet of dried lime to absorb any residual humidity. Properly dried goji berries and jujubes keep for 1 to 2 years without losing significant nutritional value. They are used throughout winter in soups, porridges, and teas as both food and warming tonic medicine. Number 6 is a fermented staple so central to Chinese winter life, it has its own regional identities across every province. Number 6. Pao kai, Chinese fermented vegetables. Pao kai is made in a specially designed clay jar with a water-sealed lid groove that allows gases to escape while preventing air and contaminants from entering. Vegetables including cabbage, carrots, radish, chili, and green beans are packed raw into the jar with salt brine, and sometimes a small amount of alcohol or old pao kai liquid as a starter culture. The water moat created by pouring water into the lid groove creates an airlock. Families in Sichuan keep a dedicated pao kai jar going continuously, adding fresh vegetables and removing ready ones in an ongoing cycle. A well-maintained pao ci jar with an active brine culture essentially never stops working. Individual vegetables ferment ready in 3 to 7 days in summer and up to several weeks in cold winter temperatures. Number 5 is deceptively humble, but arguably the most shelf-stable thing in any Chinese pantry. Number 5. Sea salt, haiyan, and its preservation role. Salt is not just a food. In Chinese households, coarse sea salt kept in sealed clay containers essentially never expires and is the foundation behind nearly every other food on this list. Families in coastal provinces would buy large quantities of sea salt in autumn from markets or directly from salt farms, storing it in ceramic jars with tight lids to prevent clumping. Salt used for preservation is never iodized commercial salt, but natural coarse Kuyan Siu Yan, which contains minerals that contribute to curing flavor. Without this stockpile of salt, none of the other preserved foods are possible. Number 4 is a liquid gold that Chinese households guard more carefully than almost anything else. Number 4. Aged rice wine vinegar, MICU. Chinese rice vinegar, when properly aged in sealed ceramic vessels, develops deep complexity and keeps indefinitely. Families in Zhejiang, home of the famous Zhenjiangku vinegar tradition, would ferment their own vinegar by allowing rice wine to continue oxidizing in open urns until it converted to vinegar, then sealing it for aging. The acidity of mature vinegar is self-preserving, used throughout winter as a condiment, digestive aid, and flavoring agent. Number 3 brings us to something smoky and ancient. Number 3. Smoked meats, sun ru. In Hunan and western Sichuan, families smoke entire cuts of pork, duck, and sometimes fish over a slow fire fueled by sawdust, tea leaves, rice husks, and fragrant wood for days. The smoking process both dries the meat and coats it with antimicrobial compounds. Properly smoked meats hung in cool, dry rooms last all winter. Number 2 is possibly the most ancient preserved food in all of Chinese culinary history. Number 2. Jiang, fermented soybean paste. Chinese jiang has been made since the Zhou dynasty. Soybeans are cooked, mixed with wheat flour and cow mold culture, formed into blocks, and then fermented in ceramic urns with salt brine under the sun for months. The finished paste in sealed crocks lasts years. And finally, number 1, the absolute most essential winter staple in Chinese household food preservation. Number 1. Pickled cabbage, known as swan kai. Swan kai is salted napa cabbage, dabai kai pressed and fermented in large ceramic vats called an kai tan. Families pack the cabbage with coarse salt, press it under heavy stones for weeks, and store it in cold cellars or outdoor storage pits where the temperature stays naturally cool. Properly made swan kai lasts through the entire winter and into spring, feeding families through the harshest months when nothing grows. Chinese food preservation is not simply a collection of recipes. It is a way of thinking about time, patience, and survival that has sustained one of the world's oldest civilizations through thousands of winters. These 20 foods are not museum artifacts. They are alive in Chinese kitchens today, and the families who make them understand something the modern world has largely forgotten: that the best preparation for an uncertain future happens quietly, in autumn, before the cold arrives.